Welcome back to The Healing Habit, where we talk about the importance of healing and how to make it a part of your everyday life. I'm your host, Cassie.
And I am Renatha Lollis.
All right, Renatha, well, let's just dive right in. I think today we're talking about just the process of forgiving, right? And what was it?
The forgiveness
The
model. Yeah.
forgiveness model. That's right.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes. Well, and as we've been talking about forgiveness as a healing habit, and forgiveness itself is kind of like the on ramp to healing. I have worked with countless clients in my coaching and counseling practice, where I'm attempting to help move them forward in life, and unforgiveness is one of those things that really kind of stays as a thorn in their side. It creates so much frustration, but it also makes them stuck in a
Yeah.
period of time.
Right.
And so, as we are trying to move forward and to help them gain victory over different things in their life and help them accomplish some of the goals that they have for themselves, I had to come up with a way to help people engage with the idea of forgiveness in a way that made it accessible.
Mm,
Because a lot of times when we're talking about forgiveness, it can sometimes seem impossible because people don't know where to begin. They don't understand that forgiveness, just like most things, really can be a process, that there are steps and stages that a person can adapt or adopt in their life, and that when they engage with these processes, it can help them become a more forgiving person.
yeah.
Now, it's also important for me to state that there are so many other models for forgiveness out there, so many different tools, and there's been lots of research, especially in recent years, about this topic of forgiveness. But for me, after doing some study of my own, and I had an opportunity to be trained by Harvard University as a forgiveness champion. And so learning about all of the different tools that are out there led me to do my own research. But then it caused me to synthesize lots of these different modalities to
Mm.
come up with something that worked well within my practice for my clients. And I have been able to help people navigate forgiveness and find the freedom that they really, really desire so that they can move forward. So, as we move forward, I'll start with the very first part of forgiveness. The very first step in this model is acknowledging the offense.
Yes.
So, in most cases, that really feels like it is probably the easiest thing, right? Where we're going to be able to articulate, this is what was done to me. This is what I
And
experienced.
is that it's a personal, you're recognizing it and acknowledging it within yourself, or are you going to another person, a
Mhm. No,
counselor?
great question.
Yeah.
This is you personally
Okay.
acknowledging what was done, right?
Okay.
And so it now you can actually meet with a counselor to help you in that process
Right.
because sometimes the offense is multi-layered, right?
Mm.
It isn't just one thing, but it could be many, many things that this one issue finally pushed you to the point where you want to end the relationship or that you're willing to acknowledge that this has been a pattern of behavior.
Yeah.
So a counselor can definitely help you do that, but the individual needs to know within themselves what really happened. Because one of the challenges is that each one of us has is that we see things from our unique perspective.
Right.
And in every situation, there are always at least two perspectives,
Right.
yours and mine.
Mhm.
And if I am only focused on seeing things from my perspective, then I rob myself of the benefit of being able to have some objectivity,
Right.
right? Because once my perspective becomes the standard, then my emotions enter into this. And I can
Mm.
tell you from my perspective, I have never made a good emotional decision.
Yes.
Right? So, as we are seeking to acknowledge the offense, it's important that we understand what actually happened.
Yeah.
So if I'm looking at this, I'm replaying the scenario so I can understand if it was harsh words that were spoken, or if it was betrayal, or if it was a failure to meet expectations,
Mhm.
or if there was a lie. I am determining exactly what happened so that I can forgive the right thing.
And I think part of that too is acknowledging what is fact and what is feeling, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So much so. Well
Mhm.
said.
Yeah.
And because sometimes we are responding to how we were made to feel and
Mhm.
not the actual fact of what
And
happened.
so much can go into that too because you have your past hurts, right? And
Yes.
past situations that have been really similar to what you may have just experienced, but maybe you're in a healthy situation now. And maybe, like, for example, a relationship.
Mhm.
You were in a toxic relationship before, somebody said these specific words to you and you're not in that relationship anymore, but you're in a new relationship and somebody said these words again, but they mean something different. But
Yes.
you're reacting because you're reacting like they're that other person.
Exactly right, and that's
Mhm.
well said, and that's what can happen many times, is that I am in relationship with you, but the offense in my response is really based on something from my past. So that's why we have to understand what we're actually forgiving,
Mhm.
and when we're in the process of understanding what actually took place, this is the opportunity for us to examine if this is emotionality that is tied to a previous experience so that I'm no longer making you pay for somebody else's indiscretion,
Right.
right? So
Right.
when I know what really happened, I can say, Cassie, I'm going to forgive you for what you did and not charge to you what somebody else did,
Right, and
right?
I think too, this is a really beautiful demonstration of how unforgiveness can actually, like, creep its way into other relationships,
Yes.
and, like, now you're not only dealing with healing in that moment where you're acknowledging your feelings with person B, but you're also person A way back then. Wow, that just revealed that I hadn't actually forgiven them the way that I thought I had.
Yes.
Just
Yes.
because 'cause they're out of your life does not mean that you've forgiven them.
And that is a fact. And sometimes we falsely believe that distance equals forgiveness,
Mhm.
right? I'm not talking to them, so I've released it. When in actuality, that offense is still living in your heart, still living in your mind, and you're ruminating on what happened. And it's now impacting your present.
Wow.
So you have to understand and acknowledge what actually happened and that your response is based on this situation and not 4 or 5 previous situations.
Yeah.
So and that goes back to what I mentioned earlier. It seems really, really easy, at least we think it is. But when we start to dig deeper and we understand that what we're responding to might not necessarily be this scenario. So
Right.
we have to understand what's happening now
Yeah.
and what I'm forgiving in this moment.
Wow.
All right. So
Wow.
the second step, and so after we've acknowledged the offense, we understand what's happening right now, is to identify the emotions that are attached to it. So, what did this offense make me feel? What did it
Mm.
bring up for me? Was it anger? Was it sadness? Was it confusion or frustration? And when I can identify the feelings that I'm feeling, now I have the ability to be able to understand what happened and in which way I was injured.
Right.
So this is a really, really crucial step because most of us aren't as in touch with our feelings as we could be,
Right.
right? We've got 5, major feelings: mad, sad, happy, glad, angry. And so with these feelings, it can make our response very shallow.
Right.
But I would encourage every person out there, just do a quick internet search for feelings wheel.
Primary and secondary emotions? I was
Yes.
gonna ask you about
Very
these.
good.
Yes, because
Yes.
I had heard that anger was a secondary emotion?
Yes, it
It is.
is. That's
Okay, so what's the
secondary.
primary of
And
that?
so but it can be other
Okay,
so it
okay.
can be
It
there
can
are
be both,
it
right?
can.
Mhm.
So but understanding though that feelings are so much more expansive. And
Yes.
with the feelings wheel, it gives you the ability to find and put words to what is happening inside of you.
Right.
I actually have a pillow in my office when I'm meeting with clients. It has a feelings wheel on it. And
So
when they're
smart.
struggling, I give them the pillow and say, figure it out. Tell me what emotion is coming up.
Yeah.
And sometimes it takes a moment of them going around and looking at the feelings wheel and they'll turn it and they'll go like, this one. This is what I'm actually feeling
Right.
because it takes them from primary to secondary to tertiary to now you can actually be able to understand what is happening
Yeah.
inside.
Yeah.
And when you get in touch with those feelings, it creates space for you to feel what you feel, acknowledge those feelings so that you can then continue in the process of healing.
Right, and, like, to put it in a word that my therapist had used too, she had told me once that you're hurt and that's translating to anger. Like,
Yes.
you think that you're just angry, but the reason that you're angry is because actually you're sad that that
Yes.
person chose to hurt you,
Yes,
you know? So
absolutely.
it's so
It
interesting.
is interesting, but as we start this process of engaging with our emotions, it's important that we don't begin to navel gaze.
Right,
So
right, right.
we're not just looking at ourselves and looking at ourselves and staying focused out on ourselves, because we can allow our emotions to become the center of our universe.
Wow.
We feel what we feel without allowing those things to control us.
Mhm.
Because here's the reality: we control our emotions. We have the ability to impact what we feel. Our emotions do not control us,
Right.
right? So, one of the things that I share with people, if my life were a train, then, and it were a train on tracks, then my emotions should be on the train. They shouldn't be the engine at the front of the train driving it forward. They
Mm.
should be the caboose. They
Right.
should be at the back of the train. It is
Passive.
important. Exactly. They're important, but emotions are information. When
Right.
I am in tune with what I'm feeling, then I have the ability to be curious about why these feelings are coming up
And I think
and the
this goes
source
back
of them.
to, what was it, episode 2 or episode 3, where we are talking about reaction versus
Response.
responding.
Yes,
Mhm.
exactly right.
Mhm.
And so feeling our feelings and acknowledging them are a really, really important part of forgiveness that can be maintained.
Right.
Right. Number three
Yes.
is going to be determining who is really impacted by holding on to unforgiveness. Because and we've talked about this before.
That's convicting.
Yes, right? Because we hold on to unforgiveness because to us, there is a value attached
Yes.
to it.
Yes.
And we've talked about previously how that value, how unforgiveness feels like accountability, right?
Yeah.
If I forgive you, then how are you going to be held accountable?
Right.
Unforgiveness can also feel like protection.
Right.
Because if I forgive you, now I have opened myself up back to be hurt again.
Mhm.
So when we understand that as we extend forgiveness, as we begin this process of determining who really is impacted by holding on to this, what we'll find is that the person who we are withholding forgiveness from, their lives are moving on. They're not having any negative impact. The person who's really impacted by holding on to this unforgiveness is you.
Wow.
And understanding that you are now stepping into a place where you may have been injured by this person, but now you're injuring yourself by holding on to unforgiveness.
Wow.
And what is so interesting about this is that the accountability that we feel like we're holding people to when we are living in unforgiveness, it really is a false accountability because it
Mm.
only lives in our mind. That person is in no way accountable to our thoughts.
Yeah.
In no way, but it feels like it.
Yeah.
And it feels like by holding on to this unforgiveness that I'm actually impacting them, when in reality, I'm only impacting myself.
You know, this is a, I'm gonna say this is like an unfiltered thought, so let me work through it with you.
Yes.
Um, but I just, I'm picturing like almost a cycle of enablement,
Mm.
in that when you are thinking that you're holding that person accountable, you're going to actually be holding yourself accountable to adjusting to their actions, which in turn, wouldn't that enable the behavior to continue?
Well, it could. So thinking about it in these terms is that as I am holding on to unforgiveness, I am having an internal dialogue about this person and about what these emotions are or how these emotions are impacting them. When in reality, my internal process has no impact on them whatsoever.
Wow.
My internal process is only impacting me.
Right.
So as I am engaging with and managing what is happening inside of me, I can falsely believe that this internal process is having impact when in fact it is having zero
Wow.
impact.
Yeah.
Now, it can influence my emotions or how I'm responding to that person, but in any way of holding them accountable, that accountability only lives in my head. It does not live in reality. Is that
Right.
making
Right.
sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Mhm.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Now, so let's move on to step number 4.
Mhm.
So, what or who could you be if you were to let the offense go?
Wow. Yes.
Because when we recognize that we are being impacted by this offense, and how we're responding to this offense, there is a shaping of our own personhood, our own identity as we're engaging with this issue.
Right.
So as I hold on to this offense and I hold on to the beliefs that I have about that person, and I'm then impacted, and we talked about some of the impacts of unforgiveness, whether it may be emotional or even physical, that it can have mental impacts, whether it is with anxiety or depression, whether it is physical with high blood pressure and issues with sleep, whether it is, even sickness or illness. As I am holding on to these offenses, then I am being shaped by what I refuse to let go.
Mm.
And what's interesting about these things that we believe we're holding on to, in reality, they're actually holding us captive.
Right.
Because if it's something that we can't let go of, then it actually has us held captive. So, if there's an offense, something that has happened, if I'm experiencing it and I am now being shaped by it, if I consider who could I be if I release this? Would I be more kind? Would I be more loving? Would I be free? Would I have less depression and anxiety? Would my life be positively impacted by releasing this offense?
Wow.
And what I found is true with people that I've worked with over the years is that in order for us to be able to engage with anything long term, any type of transformation, we have to be aware of the impact that transformation will have on us. And it's a term that I learned many years ago, and it's with them. What's in it for me?
Right.
And as far as forgiveness is concerned, when we start to think about the benefit to us, who we could be on the other side of forgiveness, it gives us something to pursue as a goal. That as I am choosing to engage with forgiveness, this is who I can become.
Wow.
Now, as we think about this and we consider that when we hold on to unforgiveness, it can make us more angry.
Mm.
It can make us more resentful.
Mhm.
We can also become more fragile emotionally. It makes us easier to accept offense from other people. We talked about this in the last podcast, where if you have an offense or something that happened to you in the past that you may be responding to, it might not necessarily even be this issue. Because if I'm holding on to things from my past, I am going to absolutely recreate them in my present.
Right. Wow.
So, step 5
Yeah.
is we have to now decide to forgive. Now, on the surface, this actually sounds like it should be pretty easy. We're talking about the healing habit. We've been talking about forgiveness, and the decision to forgive seems like it should be an easy one. When in reality, it can sometimes be the most complex.
Yeah.
Because as we've talked about all of these other reasons why we hold on to unforgiveness, when I make the decision to forgive, what I am saying in that moment is that my own emotional health is more important than me holding you in bondage.
Yes.
That in this moment, in this interaction, I'm choosing myself. And as we decide to forgive, we need to understand what our motivation is.
Mhm.
And our motivation has to be about what we desire for ourselves, not what we hope forgiveness will produce in the other person.
Right.
Because
Right.
sometimes we can forgive and we can hope that our forgiveness, as we extend it, will then cause transformation in the other person. And then when it doesn't happen, we regret forgiving
Yeah.
because we say, well, I said, I'm sorry. Aren't you sorry? And they're like, yeah, actually, I'm not. And then in that moment, you're rethinking, why did I extend forgiveness to this person?
You know what? I'm unsorry then. Yeah.
Listen, and that's the thing, right? We get so offended that we take back our apology
Yeah.
because the apology was only ever about changing their
It
behavior.
was conditional.
Exactly.
Mhm.
And forgiveness has to be about what you as the individual need.
Yeah.
It cannot be contingent upon the other person,
Yeah.
on their response, on their behavior, because forgiveness is the gift you give to yourself. It
Mhm.
is what you extend to other people for your benefit,
Wow.
not from theirs.
Wow.
And so it is about you and us as individuals saying that I'm going to choose myself.
Right.
And the cost of unforgiveness is too high for me to pay.
Wow. There's so many things here. I mean, I think I think like we have a really solid process of understanding why we need to forgive. But I'm hearing this and like listening to this, I'm wondering like, okay, so how do I cross that bridge? Like it sounds digestible. I
Mhm.
can understand I need to forgive that person for my own benefit, and I even recognize that I need to understand, that it's not about them.
Yeah.
It's not about changing their actions, it's about recognizing and letting go in my heart so that this has no power over me anymore, and I have authority over my own feelings and my own actions and my own relationships, and I get to decide who I interact with and who I don't interact with, right? Like all these things go hand in hand.
Mhm.
But I'm like, so how do we cross the bridge now?
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's why each of these steps has to build on itself.
Right. Mhm.
Because if I'm considering who I am on the other side of forgiveness, and I have determined that I'm the person who's being impacted by the unforgiveness,
Mhm.
then the benefit of making the decision is all on my side.
Right.
Then I'm going to be better because of it.
Right.
And if I am trying to adopt a lifestyle of healing where I want healing to be a habit for me, then I am always taking into consideration my emotional, my physical, and my spiritual health.
Mhm.
And that I'm in turn engaging in behaviors that are going to impact me in a positive way.
Right.
And if I'm going to choose to forgive, then it has to be in my own best self interest.
Right.
And when I take these steps successively into consideration, they build upon themselves. I've acknowledged the offense. I've honored my feelings. I've determined who's really impacted by holding on. I understand who I could be, if I let go. And now, after I've considered each of these steps, now I'm at a place where I see the value of making the choice to forgive for me
Mm.
because I'm the person that's going to be better for it.
Right. And I want to ask this question. I wanted to ask it in our last episode, but we ran out of time.
Mhm.
So now that we have a little bit more time to dive into this and I'm gonna play a little bit of devil's advocate here
Okay.
because for someone who is independent and
Mhm.
someone who is able to thrive on their own, they have the freedom to make these kinds of choices where they can say, I can't have this person in my life. I'm going to kind of back off, or maybe it's a situation where you're going to really have the time to invest into healing that relationship. What do we do for the people who are dependent? The children, the people who live at home with an abusive family member, don't have enough money to go out and get their own home or stuff like that. And I say children, but I mean even above the age of 18. Like I'm not saying people who are necessarily they have the option of going into a better life, it's like that or you live in your car.
Yeah.
Some people would hear what you're saying and be like, is that the better choice? Is that the better choice for me to maybe forgive, but also recognize that this is not a healthy person for me to have in my life at this current point? Because I'm only saying this, I was speaking with somebody who, was going through something like this, and it's challenging because 'cause I'm, like, immediately, like, "You're above the age of 18. Go, live your life." But they were saying that they live at home with their parent, and that is just tragic to think about feeling stuck, you know?
Yes, yes.
So
And what you're describing is actually true for a lot of people, right? Where they feel as if they are in a relationship and they feel stuck. They feel like they have no recourse. But what I would say is that the same thing is true for a person who has options and the person who is stuck. Is that you can create your own internal boundaries about what you will accept and about the proximity that you have to a
mhm.
person.
Yeah.
And I think that when we're talking about removing someone from our lives, it has got to be the last resort. We've
Mhm.
got to have gotten to a place where we have tried and we've had conversation. It cannot be the first resort, and we're operating in a space and time where the tendency to cut people out of our lives has become so much easier.
Yeah.
We're very disconnected. We're already living very separate lives. And that independence can be a very toxic thing that if we use it as a weapon, that independence can then lead to isolation.
Mhm.
Because once you start the process of cutting people out of your life,
Yeah.
the first time you do it, second time's a lot easier.
Mhm.
Third time, it makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
And you can then isolate yourself from everyone. And I think that this has to be something that has to be weighed, it has to be considered, and it has to really be discussed with people who can give you wise counsel and also give you a different perspective.
So, how do you work on your emotional intelligence so that
Mm,
you are able to create those inner boundaries?
yeah,
Because I think a lot of listeners and a lot of us would just hear this kind of thing and be like, that's great. I don't think I'm able to do that. Or maybe they think that they can, but then they enter into a situation and they're like, okay, I'm gonna keep this person on the outer circle, like we were talking about in the last episode.
yeah,
And and then that person kinda just creeps their way back in, even though they shouldn't be, you
yeah,
know?
yeah.
Not to say cut out completely, but, from the outer circle and kinda bring themselves back in,
Yes.
you know?
Well, here's what I will tell you. They didn't bring themselves back in, you allowed them back in.
There you go.
Right?
Yes, yeah.
So a boundary is only as good as your willingness to hold
Right,
it.
right, right.
So if there is an expectation about how you're going to be treated and how you're going to communicate with the person,
Yeah,
being able to have that conversation where you're expressing to them your expectations for what a healthy relationship looks like. I'll give you an example. If you're living in a house with someone who is, let's say you're an adult and you have a parent who speaks to you in a way that you feel is disrespectful and dishonorable, and it is a can be a very unhealthy dynamic. It is being able to choose a time when things are going great, and when you're having pleasant interactions, and being able to say, "Hey, is it possible for us to maybe talk for just a second? I feel like there's some problems with our communication, and I just want us to be able to have better communication because I want you to be able to hear me, and I want to be able to hear you. Like,
yeah,
so can we talk for just a second?"
yeah,
And being able to set the expectation where you start off saying, "I love you." And I want our relationship to be the best that it possibly can
yeah,
be. And the way that it is right now is not really good. I don't think it's good for either one of us. I
right.
know you're frustrated because you're yelling, and I'm frustrated because I'm being yelled at.
Yeah,
So, why don't we maybe come up with a way to be able to talk about what we need, and let's set some rules for how we're going to communicate with each other. So,
right.
let's come up and let's sit down and let's come up with a plan of what your expectations are for me,
Mhm.
or maybe it's about the things that I do around the house because I want to meet those expectations. And I want to be able to share with you what my expectations are so that we can communicate so all of our needs can get met,
Yeah,
right? So you're starting out affirming that the relationship has value,
yeah,
but you're also explaining what both of you want,
right.
which is to get your needs met
Mhm.
and coming up with a way for that conversation to be able to lead to both of you being heard and ultimately both of you having what you need.
Yeah. I was gonna say, can I ask a question? But that's like my job. So one more question I have for you here is, I wanna know where like a good length of time is to start putting this into practice of like, no, I shouldn't cut you out, or I shouldn't, because for example, somebody's been in your life for a week or a
Mhm.
month and
Yeah.
they start treating you like this right off the bat.
Mhm.
I feel like that doesn't have its roots yet, and it's easy to, um wow, so many questions just ran through my head at the same time. But like if something doesn't have its roots, then it's a lot easier to cut it off, right?
Yeah.
And I think some of that, and maybe this is another conversation for another day.
Mhm.
Um, but I also think some of that has to do with your emotional boundaries in terms of how close and how fast you let somebody get close to you,
Yeah. Mhm.
because I think a lot of people jump straight to, okay, we're best friends and you've only known them for a week. And that can be really hard, or saying I love you in a dating relationship really early on, and that can cause it to feel challenging to escape.
Yeah, no, I completely understand. What I'll say, because I think this is something that we definitely need to talk about and
Yeah.
go a
Yeah.
lot deeper in, because as we're considering the idea of cutting somebody out of your life, as I said, this should be the last resort in all scenarios.
Mm.
When we're making the decision that we're just going to cut somebody completely out of our life, we are moving into a place of absolutes. And so being able to, whatever the situation is, to simply consider it, and
Wow.
sometimes having a conversation, just meeting with someone human to human
Yeah.
and expressing our concern, because what we're assuming is that that other person understands what they're doing.
Yeah.
They understand how they're showing up in the world.
Yes.
And if we are able to have productive conversations, we can become more resilient and we can become stronger as we learn how to manage conflict and not always avoid it.
Renatha, is this something that we could talk about maybe on the next episode a little bit more? Because I know we're kind of pressed for time right here, but I feel like this is something that's a lot deeper than, like a lot deeper of a conversation than just something we're able to answer in a couple minutes.
Absolutely, I think
Yeah.
that's a great idea. We can
Okay.
definitely spend some time talking about it.
Yeah.
So I would love to do that.
Hmm.
But finally, the sixth and
Oh,
final
I thought
step.
there were 5
Nope, there's six steps. This is the last
steps. I'm
step.
so sorry,
No,
everybody.
that's okay. The sixth and the final step is
Yes.
offer the gift of forgiveness.
Yes.
Because the decision to forgive is different than extending the forgiveness.
Mm.
When I offer that gift of forgiveness, what I'm saying is that I am choosing to release you from the debt.
Wow.
And it is important for us to make the actual step of forgiving so that we can receive the full benefit. And
Wow.
when we forgive, when we doubt it, we have to remember we've extended this gift, whether somebody receives it or not. We've made the decision that we are going to extend the gift of forgiveness.
That is so good. I'm really excited about the next several weeks of episodes. But thank you guys so much for tuning in to this episode of The Healing Habit. Again, I'm your host, Cassie.
And I'm Renatha Lollis.
And if you are looking to dive a little bit deeper into your healing habits, we're going to include some links in the description down below. We'd love for you to check them out, maybe even some places that you can get some professional help. Again, thank you so much for listening. And we will see you guys next episode where we talk about.
Detailed forgiveness of the forgiveness model.
All right. See you guys next time.